So last time I've been speaking about the fourth Vipallasa, the fourth distortion of perception, which goes like this. Seeing what is not beautiful asubha as beautiful subha. And this insight is based on the first of the four establishments of mindfulness, the four satipatthana, which is the central template of Buddhist meditation teaching in all three schools of Buddhism. And this consists of three practices. The first one being body parts, the second one elements, and the third one mortality or corpse contemplation in the case of the first satipatthana. And insight into these three ways also opens the mind into not self or emptiness, anatta, which is the central insight of the Buddha's dispensation. This is the central insight which is liberating and then, affects the mind to let go, and then there's these four stages of awakening in the Theravada canon, starting with stream entry and ending with arahantship. And there's also the contemplation on death or mortality, which gives us a sense of urgency and, helps us to set priorities in our lives. And, I think if the Buddha would have been alive today, he might have formulated a fifth Vipallasa. Classically, there are only four. Seeing that which is impermanent as permanent, seeing that which is dukkha as pleasure, seeing that which is not self as a self, and seeing that which is not beautiful as beautiful. So that's the four classic Vipallasa, and I would say, if the Buddha would have been alive today, he would have formulated most likely a fifth Vipallasa, because our times are characterized by a deep disconnection of most humans, like us, that have been conditioned inside of capitalist consumerist cultures. This very deep disconnection and all of the conditioning, which comes from being instructed that this nature, this biosphere is separate from us and there for us to extract from. And it's these groups of humans, who have been growing up like this, like us, who are living mostly in the global north. And we are behind the, extraction which is happening and which is at the foundation of the climate crisis. Because the earth systems are unable to regenerate themselves at the rate at which the extraction and the pollution is happening. And that's nothing new for all of us. That's why we are here, because we recognize that. But then we also recognize it's not that easy to change all of this. So this is a root problem for what's happening on the planet, and it can't be solved from the same level of consciousness which created it. That's a very famous saying by Albert Einstein. So we need to drop deeper into reality to be really able to connect with responses which are coming from a deeper wisdom, not from the intellect. So we need to step back and hold the discomfort of the momentum of doing more of the same. Because, those habits, they are very powerful, and if we don't enact them, there's a discomfort, a sense of stress. But it's a stress which comes from growth, from the stretching of not doing the same thing again and again. And because of that, we need to work with perception. So we need to work with perception to support our returning to a larger picture and to viscerally experience ourselves again as part of a living, intelligent earth. Like our forebears, our indigenous forebears in the distant past have been experiencing themselves viscerally as part of a living, intelligent earth, because that was part of the culture. They had ceremonies, rituals, stories, names. The whole upbringing was designed to instill that recognition, because it made it safe to be living in that way. And we have kind of risen above it. We were thinking with scientific and technological accomplishments, and we're thinking that this is a primitive way of thinking, to be part of the earth, to feel related to animals and plants. That was considered a really primitive way of looking. And now, bang, we wake up to it. No, it was not at all primitive. It was super sophisticated, actually. So now we are in this conundrum, realizing, oh my gosh, we have been selling ourselves out for something, which isn't really reliable. So a fifth Vipallasa could sound like this: seeing what is connected as separate or disconnected. So a fifth Vipallasa can help us to remember that we are actually part of a living, intelligent being in the form of a planet called Earth. And we're like little cells in this vast planet. And looking like that, can bring balance, just in the same way as the other four classic Vipallasas do. They bring balance, and they help us to see deeper into, what's really happening. And that process is requiring us, to sense and feel with the whole body, not just stay up in the head, which is like a very safe kind of ivory tower, which is like what our modern education systems are pricing above all. And then we have computers and AI, which doing more of the same, only faster. But it all is more or less disconnected from that which makes all of this possible. For example, eating, drinking, and breathing. Without that, we wouldn't be here. And all of these AI data centers and so on, they eat a lot of minerals and water, and are ravenous, really, while at the same time doing just the same thing, working on that same level of disconnection, just extremely fast. So we are really in a pickle, seriously. And there's these pockets of sanity, these islands of coherence, and the Wednesday Earthworm practice group is one of such pockets where we simply, are showing a willingness to go through the discomfort of debunking this old way of looking and coming into a direct connection with the biosphere through a little bit of imagination, like in the same way, as these visualizations work in the Vajrayana Buddhism, and certain instructions for sensing and feeling. So it's not very complicated, but it's it's like learning a new language, as I say very often. It takes repetition, and it takes willingness, to be caught learning, because it's not immediately accessible, or just maybe for a moment, and then we snap out of it and get back into it, and it's just a process. So it's really difficult, on a planet where 8% of the population holds 50% of the wealth. And many of us, in particular in the global south, but also in the global north, are living in constant worry on how to survive or pay the next bill. That, brings about like a contraction of the nervous system. And that naturally, leads to a disconnection. If you are contracted, there is no capacity to appreciate the interconnectedness, because all of the capacity for sensing and feeling is hardened. We are kind of protecting like a hedgehog. He doesn't want to know anything than the immediate me. It's a sense of defense. And it's actually, we're defending against that which keeps us alive, if we are aware or not. So I think that's enough for the reflection today, and I'd like to, make a transition now to a guided meditation by introducing to you what's called the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, which is a chant which is, done in Theravadan monasteries on a regular basis, ideally on a daily basis. And I'm sure, all other schools of Buddhism have similar reflections. And I'm gonna chant it for you and also screen share it in so you can see it. So please, find a posture you can sustain for about 40 minutes. And just really arriving on your seat. And feeling, how you are right now. Are you tired? Are you exhausted? Are you interested, excited, at ease? Whatever it is. Wherever you are. I'm just gonna now chant those 5 subjects for frequent recollection. And I know them since like a very long time now, 35 years, 36 years, 37 years even. Handamayanga pinya pachavekana patang panamase charatamo me charanang anatita. I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. Bayadi Dhammo mi bayading anatita. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. Marana Dhammo mi maranang anatita. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. Sapehi me piyehi manapehi nana pavo vinapavo. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. Kamma sakami kamma dayata kamma yoni kamma bandhu kamma patisarana yang kammang karisami kalayanang va papakang va tasatayata pavisami. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Evang ang he pinhang Pachave Kitapang. Thus we should frequently recollect. So that's this ancient contemplation, reflection, which gives us a connection to our ancestors and future generations. Our ancestors who knew belonging to earth in their bones. And we have that same information in our bones, but at this point in history we have kind of forgotten it. But we can bring that back, that memory, through training and through a renewed respect for these ways of looking. Indigenous ways, tribal ways, Aboriginal ways. And that doesn't mean, we need to learn practices from different cultures or go back in time or go back into living in the forest or something like that, like hunter-gatherers. No, it means to just bring back that way of looking and apply it to the way we live today and see what that gives birth to. And calling to mind the future ones whose lives will be shaped by what we decide to do or not do. So being on this crossroads, this threshold in an increasingly conscious way, by really feeling into this fundamental predicament of bringing back a visceral participation in the planet, which is the support system which makes our lives possible. And which is, taking for granted, unfortunately. Which goes hand in hand also with misogyny and the patriarchy. A way of conditioning which goes very deep and needs to, really be named and brought into consciousness so that it can shift in service of survival of our species, really. So returning to a deeper place from which wise action can emerge, rather than trying to figure it out with the head, with the intellect, which is an excellent servant, but not a very reliable master. Just like AI, it could be an excellent servant, but it cannot be a master, because it just repeats the same thing all over again, just faster. So sensing, into the weight of the body and the hardness where the buttocks meets the cushion, the chair. That's like a direct experience of earth element. The hardness and structure. And we can also sense it if we bite our teeth together or touch our nails. And the whole skeleton inside the body is also an expression of earth element, the hardness, the structure. Without the skeleton, we wouldn't be able to sit upright. It'd be just a heap on the floor. It's just connecting with the structure, the hardness, and the fact, that if we stop eating earth element for 1 or 2 months, the body cannot sustain itself. So there's a constant exchange happening. We eat food, it becomes part of the body for some time, and then the rest goes into the bathroom, which goes back into the earth. And then new food comes out, and we eat that. And this mysterious process, which doesn't stop anywhere. Even when the body dies, it just goes back. It's like, it's mind-blowing how perfect this process is. And really allowing that to sink in and be felt. The befuddlement, the oh my gosh, I never really considered that. That's how maturation happens. By exposing oneself to a way of looking which brings us deeper, brings us from the head into the body of the planet. And then slowly, but surely developing the visceral recognition of that through attunement. Like when you go to another country and then, want to learn the language, you have to attune, you have to get interested. What does that mean in Italian, for example, and then as you're learning the language, as you're going through this town, you start to listening out, what do they say? And then slowly sometimes you understand a word, and then sometimes you understand even a whole sentence. And that's how the process works. So sensing the hardness, the structure of earth element, and the softness, fluidity of water element in the flesh and inside the mouth. And if we, stop drinking for 5-6 days, the body shuts down. And this water element on the planet, has been recycled for millions of years. It's always the same water element. Coming from the depths of the earth and then evaporating and going up into the clouds and coming down as rain and then going back into the earth. It's amazing. Through this process, it's going to get filtered again and again and renewed. And we are constantly, part of the watershed where we live. If you stay in place, you're drinking the water coming out of the tap of your watershed, and then comes, goes through the body, goes back into the bathroom, goes through the sewage system, is going to be purified and goes back into the earth, and then comes out of the tap again. So where does your body begin and where does it end? It doesn't really end at the skin. And the work is to stay aware of that experience of embeddedness, to sense into that. And in that way, slowly letting go of that misperception of separation. The fifth Vipallasa. Seeing that which is deeply connected as disconnected or separate. The old paradigm of seeing ourselves on the planet like on a stage. And then, noticing, no, We are actually inside of the planet. We are participant of it. And we can open to that and invite that information to change us. So it's a little bit of a visualization, visualizing ourselves as inside of Earth, and then sensing and feeling. And there's this, quote by James Hillman, American Jungian psychotherapist, who has said many, many, many years ago, to sense deeply we must imagine, and to imagine accurately we must sense. And the sensing, doesn't have a lot of value in our dying cultural paradigm, which only trusts machines and technology. But sensing with the body is considered primitive. So that's a very silly thing to say. We are waking up to that now. Becoming aware of the respect for indigenous ways of looking. Some, of these cultures or nations, they are living in place since thousands of years without exhausting the biosphere there. But working together to bring about, support abundance. And not, taking only so much. Not taking everything. And having rules and regulations which are followed with a long-term view. And if one experiences oneself as part of a living intelligent earth, it's much easier to bring about this adherence, to rules and regulations, which is totally out the window in capitalist, consumerist cultures. There's only like the few who kind of stealing everything from everyone else. And it's okay. There's no way we can stop them at this point. It's done, in broad daylight, and the law isn't able to catch it because it's completely crazy, completely ungrounded. So there's something seriously out of sync. And it's important to recognize that. And the vastness of the issue only the earth can really hold all of this. And as the old paradigm is starting to show more and more cracks and incapacities to really meet the needs of the moment, we can attune to what is coming up through the cracks, from the depths, underneath the old way of looking. And you're connecting on this visceral level by sensing into the aliveness, the vibrancy, vitality of the earth, which knows what to do since a very long time. And aligning ourselves with that by sensing into it. Whenever the mind wanders off into thinking about something, just gently coming back to the sensing of this vitality, the aliveness, the energy body. Which is an expression of the vast body of the earth. And our human bodies are our lifeline, our connection into the vaster body of the earth. They're like receivers for that communication, this wordless communication, which is happening on an energetic level. And then calling us into a conscious participation and what that entails in terms of where the information is coming from. It's not about us little cells, imposing some programming onto the planet, but it's more like opening to that information which is coming to us from the planet. Allowing the earth to save us, not the other way around. So this, superiority conceit of thinking, that we can destroy or save the earth. We can only destroy or save ourselves, if anything. And also all other species, we have been driving off the planet or endangered through our technologies and the impact of the degradation by cutting down the forests and putting out the plastic into the oceans and all of these very dangerous things which are underway. And the livestock, it creates so much trouble. Transport systems. Just naming it is really helpful. Even if we don't know right away what our contribution can be, naming it is a beginning. Naming doesn't need to include blaming, just naming it. So this conscious experience of being alive as the planet. And receiving information via the body, which changes the cellular wiring as we are, having a reality check, and then the wiring adjusts to what is experienced consciously. So it's an emergent knowing that the intellect can serve, but not not control or replace or anything like that. The intellect is not capable for that, because the intellect cannot grasp the situation. It's much too mysterious. It cannot be grasped in concepts. But it can then, when that is, the attunement has happened, then the intellect can help to execute what is understood beneath that. That's also like a saying, by Albert Einstein. I can only paraphrase it like something like, the intellect is a servant of intuition, not the other way around. I share a poem by John Soos. To be of the earth is to know the restlessness of being a seed, the darkness of being planted, the struggle toward the light, the pain of growth into the light, the joy of bursting and bearing fruit, the love of being food for someone, the scattering of your seeds, the decay of the seasons, the mystery of death, and the miracle of birth. To be of the earth is to know the restlessness of being a seed, the darkness of being planted, the struggle toward the light, the pain of growth into the light, the joy of bursting and bearing fruit, the love of being food for someone, the scattering of your seeds, the decay of the seasons, the mystery of death, and the miracle of birth. So sitting a few more minutes and then I'm gonna ring the bell.